Alpha King betrayed his Luna for another woman. She returned as the queen of his ruin. The kingdom of Velmora was draped in the silver glow of moonlight. Its forests stretched like dark rivers of shadow and mist, its mountains standing tall like ancient sentinels. Within this kingdom, where wolves ruled with intelligence and humans whispered of magic, the Alpha King, Kale Draven, was feared and revered. His strength was unmatched, his mind sharp as obsidian and his heart, once devoted to one soul alone, his Luna, Saraphina. Saraphina was not merely his mate, she was his balance. Where Kale carried fire, Saraphina held water. Where Kale demanded obedience, she offered guidance. She was a silver flame in a world of iron. Together, they were the living embodiment of prophecy, a bond foretold in the ancient scrolls of Velmora, a bond so sacred that no moon ritual could be complete without their united presence. The people of Velmora admired them. Packs whispered songs of their love beneath the stars. In the courts, nobles bowed and smiled with envy. But even in perfection, shadows lingered. It began with Lady Liriana. She arrived from the southern courts as an emissary, a woman draped in gowns that shimmered like the evening sky. Her smile was gentle, her voice like the wind over the cliffs. And yet, beneath that calm surface, there was a hunger that Seraphina sensed immediately. Liriana did not merely wish to serve Velmora, she wished to enter its heart, its throne, and its king. Kale, for all his strength, had a weakness. He was proud. He believed he could handle any challenge, face any foe, and command any heart. But Liriana's subtle provocations were like seeds in fertile soil. She praised his decisions, praised his strategy, and suggested that mercy made kings weak. Seraphina felt the change before Kale did. She noticed the longer glances, the soft sighs in private chambers, the unspoken weight in Kale's presence. When she approached him in the moonlit hall, she found him staring out over the cliffside, his expression unreadable. "You look far away, my Alpha," she said softly. Kale turned, and for a moment their eyes met as they always had, silver into silver, flame into flame. But when he smiled, it did not reach his eyes. "I am thinking of the kingdom," he said, a taut line between his words. "That is all." Seraphina nodded, though a cold shiver ran through her. The bond that had once pulsed strongly between them, a force they both could feel even in the smallest touch, flickered. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Seraphina knew. She had lived with the rhythm of their connection for decades. She could feel its dying pulse. The first act of betrayal came quietly, not with a scream, nor with a sword. It came during the blood moon ceremony, a night sacred to Velmora's wolves and their gods. Seraphina and Kale were to stand before the High Council, reaffirming the Luna-Alpha bond, their hearts linked beneath the glowing moon. The ritual was ancient, binding not just souls but the life force of their packs, a covenant of protection and guidance. As Seraphina stepped forward, Liriana appeared at Kale's side. It had been planned, whispered by cunning courtiers, though Seraphina could never have guessed the depth of deception. The king, who once would have faced 1,000 storms to defend his Luna, did nothing. "Tonight," Kale said, his voice steady but hollow, "I will not stand with Seraphina as my Luna." A gasp rose from the council. Seraphina froze, disbelief freezing her limbs. She searched his face, looking for the man she loved, the man who had sworn before the moons that no power could separate them. But the face that looked back at her was unfamiliar. It was a king who had let desire overtake duty, pride overtake love. "Kale," she whispered. "Seraphina," he said, turning slightly, avoiding her gaze, "you must understand. Velmora needs more than mercy. It needs strength, decisive strength." Her heart fractured, each word a blade. The bond between them, the sacred connection that had been forged in moonlight and blood, weakened, as if the world itself were recoiling. Seraphina realized, with a dread she had never felt, that this was not a temporary falter. It was final. Liriana stepped forward, smiling gently, offering a hand. Kale took it, and the council murmured. Wolves and humans alike watched, stunned, as the Alpha King publicly betrayed his Luna. Saraphina could feel the veil, the thin layer between this world and the haunted forests beyond, calling to her. She did not falter. Not yet. When the ceremony ended, she left the castle without a word. She did not turn back, even as Kale's eyes, for a fleeting moment, searched for her across the stone courtyard. The wind rose, carrying whispers of the ancient spirits, warning that the world was shifting. The veil would lay beyond the eastern borders, a forest no wolf returned from unchanged. It was said to be alive, fed by grief, and ruled by forgotten powers. Seraphina did not hesitate. She crossed into its shadowed depths, her heart heavy with betrayal, her mind alight with sorrow. The trees of the Valewood were taller than towers, their roots twisting like serpents. Fog rolled along the ground, thick and silver. Wolves' eyes glowed in the mist, but they were not pack members. They were spirits, guardians, and echoes of ancient magic. Seraphina walked among them, feeling the forest test her at every step. She was not afraid. She was heartbroken, yes, and trembling with grief, but fear was a luxury she could not afford. She had been cast aside, betrayed by the man she had loved more than life itself. That pain had to transform, or it would consume her entirely. Days passed as she wandered the forest, surviving on roots, streams, and the lessons whispered by the veil itself. Shadows became companions. Mist taught her to see beyond the visible. She faced illusions of her past, Kale's face twisted in anger, Liriana's smile sharp as a dagger. Each vision cut, but each vision also strengthened her resolve. Then came the night of the silver storm. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the forest in ghostly bursts. Seraphina stumbled beneath a dying silver tree, her body exhausted, her spirit stretched thin. And then from the roots a voice spoke, deep, resonant, neither human nor wolf. Cast out Luna, rise as something more. The forest trembled, roots shifted. Light gathered into a halo around Seraphina, silver and violet, lifting her from the ground. She felt herself stretched, reshaped, like water poured into a new vessel. The sorrow, the betrayal, the loneliness, all were forged into something greater. Her hair shimmered with moonlight, her eyes turned molten twilight, and her heartbeat synced with the veil itself. She was no longer merely a Luna. She was a queen of shadows, a being born from grief, strength, and ancient power. For a long moment, she stood in the center of the storm, letting the forest pour its magic into her. Every wound in her heart became a wound in the world, a fracture in the kingdom she had once protected. She did not hate Kale yet. That would come later when she had learned the full measure of her power, but she understood with cold clarity that nothing would ever be the same. When the storm passed, Seraphina opened her eyes. The Valewood had changed her. The silver mist curled around her like a cloak. Wolves bowed as she passed. The spirits of the forest whispered her new name, a name she had not chosen but one that felt inevitable, the Luna of shadow and moonfire. She looked toward Velmora. Far beyond the misted horizon, the castle gleamed faintly under the moon. Her heart, still aching, pulsed with a new purpose. The man who had betrayed her, the kingdom that had allowed betrayal to bloom, they would know her power, but not yet. First, she would learn. First, she would grow. First, she would become the storm that even kings feared. The forest watched her, silent and eternal, and as she walked deeper into its heart, she whispered to herself, "The Luna may fall, but the queen will rise." And in that moment the world shifted. Not because Seraphina had returned, but because she was no longer the woman who had been cast aside. She was something more, something older than the moon, older than betrayal, older than Velmora itself. The Valewood was not kind to those who entered its depths. It did not nurture the weak, nor did it forgive those who carried heartbreak. For Seraphina, the forest became both teacher and crucible. Every step was a lesson, every shadow a mirror of the pain she had endured. She learned to survive first, then to thrive. Wolves of shadow and bone followed her silently, drawn to her presence, drawn to the pulse of her heart that still beat with sorrow and fire. These were not ordinary wolves, nor were they ordinary spirits. They were the echoes of centuries, the remnants of Luna and Alpha pairs who had walked the Valewood before her. Some had been broken by betrayal, some had been reborn in power. All recognized her, or perhaps they recognized the potential she carried, to command not with fear but with the quiet, unwavering authority of pain transformed into strength. The days blurred into nights, and the nights into storms. Saraphina faced illusions that tested her mind. She saw Kale's face twisted in anger, calling her name while embracing another. She saw Liriana not as a woman, but as a shadow feeding on her grief. Each vision struck her heart with a sharp edge, but each also strengthened her resolve. She began to understand something vital. Survival alone was not enough. She had been cast aside, but she would not remain powerless. It was during the seventh night of the Blood Mist, a rare event when the Valewood's fog turned silver and seemed to hum with energy, that the forest revealed its greatest secret. Beneath the gnarled roots of an ancient silver oak, a hollow opened, glowing faintly with violet and moonlight. A voice, deep and resonant, spoke from within. "Child of betrayal, you have endured, you have bled, and yet you rise. Will you claim the power that was always yours?" Saraphina knelt, unsure whether she was speaking to the forest or some god hidden beneath it. I will not let them break me," she whispered. "Break you?" The voice echoed through the roots and branches. "No, you have already been broken, but you may rise. Only one who has known true betrayal can command what lies beyond. Do you understand?" The forest pulsed, shadows shifting to reveal a figure that seemed part woman, part moonlight, her eyes like twin moons reflected in still water. This was the Vale Sovereign, a forgotten lunar deity bound beneath the forest centuries ago, trapped by mortals and magic alike. She extended a hand, offering not comfort but power. "Take it," she said. "Take the strength to forge your destiny. To command not with weakness but with the justice the living fear to deliver. You were exiled now, rise as queen of shadow and moonfire." Saraphina hesitated. The temptation was immense. To take this power would change her forever. But the betrayal she had endured, the pain and loss, had prepared her for this. She nodded. Her voice, steady, carried the weight of decision. "I will rise." The forest seemed to breathe, the silver mist swirling around her in a cyclone of power. The Vale Sovereign's essence intertwined with her own, a delicate dance of light and shadow. Pain and sorrow became energy. Her grief became strength. Every memory of Kale's betrayal, every stolen moment, every whispered lie, all of it became fuel for the transformation. When it ended, Saraphina was no longer the Luna who had walked into the Valewood. Her hair shimmered with streaks of silver and violet, her eyes molten twilight, reflecting not only the moon but the shadows themselves. Her presence radiated authority, sorrow, and unyielding strength. She was reborn, but with power came understanding. She saw visions of Velmora, rivers darkening, crops failing, packs becoming restless. Kale, for all his strength, had not realized the consequences of his betrayal. Without her, the kingdom was unbalanced, a world where the natural and supernatural rhythms were misaligned. And Liriana had grown ambitious, her magic feeding not on love but on control, seeking to twist Velmora's fate to her will. Seraphina's lips curved, not in joy, but in a quiet, deadly determination. She would return, but not as the Luna Kale had known. She would return as something more, a queen forged by pain, tempered by grief, and empowered by shadows. For years she trained beneath the Vale Sovereign's guidance. The forest was her mentor, teaching her to move like shadow, strike like the wind, and endure like stone. She mastered the art of silent command over spectral wolves, creatures born of mist and moonlight. Their loyalty was absolute. They mirrored her strength, her will, and her heart's intent. Seraphina's days were filled with rigorous tests. illusions designed to break her will, visions meant to tempt her with revenge, moments when the forest itself seemed to challenge her resolve. She endured every trial, understanding that vengeance alone was not enough. She needed wisdom, precision, and timing. A queen's power was not in destruction, but in control over the chaos others could not command. One night, under the twin moons reflected in a still black lake, Saraphina sat alone on a silver rock. She thought of Kale, of the man she had loved so fiercely, and of Liriana, who had wormed her way into the Alpha's heart. Pain surged, but it was sharper, clearer, like a blade honed to exact purpose. She no longer wished for mere revenge. She wished for justice, for restoration, for Velmora to survive the mistakes of the past. The Veil's sovereign appeared beside her, silent as the mist. "You have learned well," the deity said. "But remember, power without purpose is like a river without banks. You have strength, but will you have wisdom? Will you use this gift to save, or will it consume you as it consumed others?" Seraphina's eyes reflected the moons. "I will not be consumed. I will be the storm they never saw coming, the moonlight in the darkness. I will protect Velmora, and I will show Kale the cost of his betrayal." The sovereign nodded, fading into the mist. The forest was silent once more, except for the faint rustle of spectral wolves circling her. She was no longer alone. She had an army not of flesh, but of shadow, obedience, and loyalty born of ancient magic. Years passed like this, though time and the veil would moved strangely, bending to the will of those within it. Seraphina grew in power, in wisdom, in confidence. Her grief remained, but it had transformed into something almost sacred, a force that honed her into a queen, not just a survivor. She learned to bend moonlight into protection and strategy, to command spirits and wolves alike, to move unseen yet strike with precision. She became a myth whispered about in the Valewood, a shadow no mortal dared approach. And yet her heart remained tethered to Velmora. She saw visions of Kale, older, weary, ruling alongside Liriana, but unfulfilled. The bond they once shared, the pulse that had connected them under the moons, had never fully died. She felt it now as a faint tremor, a distant echo calling her back to the kingdom she had once loved, a reminder that her transformation was not yet complete. The first time she left the depths of the Valewood to observe Velmora from a distant hill, the kingdom sprawled before her like a story written in stone and light. Kale's castle gleamed faintly under the moon, its towers reaching for a sky that seemed to mourn what had been lost. The packs below moved restlessly. There was tension in the air, whispers of fear and discontent, signs that her absence had left a void. Seraphina felt the bond stir again. It was faint, but unmistakable. It was the same bond she had felt when she had been Luna, when she had walked beside Kale as equal, as partner, as soul-bound mate. But now it carried something else, power, authority, and a promise of reckoning. She did not move yet, only watched, letting the knowledge settle. The time would come. Soon she would step from the Valewood. Soon Kale would see not the Luna he had betrayed, but the queen forged in curse, in shadow, and in the power of the veil. And Liriana would see the consequence of meddling in hearts and kingdoms that were not hers to command. Seraphina took a deep breath, the mist curling around her like a cloak. She felt the pulse of the Veil sovereign within her, the heartbeat of the spectral wolves at her command, and the weight of her destiny pressing down. The bond she had lost would not be reclaimed easily. Love alone would not restore what had been broken. But justice, strategy, and power, these she wielded now, and the storm that had been brewing in shadow was ready to descend. She turned back toward the heart of the forest, letting the mists close behind her. Her steps were steady, confident, and full of purpose. The Valewood had crowned her in shadow, taught her the language of grief and power, and sharpened her resolve to a blade that would one day cut through deceit, betrayal, and arrogance alike. Yet even as she moved, she felt it, faint, insistent, the pulse of the bond that Kale had severed. It was alive, and it was calling her back to the kingdom, to the man who had once been her world, and to the reckoning that awaited them all. The queen forged in curse had arisen, and Velmora would never be the same again. Velmora slept uneasily beneath a moon that seemed dimmer than usual. The rivers ran sluggish, the forests whispered warnings, and the wolves moved restlessly under the starlit sky. Even the nobility, cloaked in their wealth and titles, felt it, a ripple of unease that could not be explained. In the high towers of the castle, Kale Draven paced. The Alpha King's hands, usually steady as forged steel, trembled ever so slightly. There had been rumors, packs reporting strange shadows at the borders, villages finding spectral wolves circling their homes, Liriana's spies vanishing without a trace. Yet more troubling was the pull in his chest, a tremor he could neither hide nor ignore. It was her. Kale had felt the bond before, faint and buried but alive. He had thought he had severed it, cast it aside when he betrayed Saraphina, but it was persistent, insistent. And now it was stronger than ever. Someone was coming back to Velmora. He stopped by the window, gazing out over the Silvertouch forests. The wind carried a strange chill, and Kale's chest tightened. Saraphina, he murmured. The name felt foreign on his tongue after years of betrayal, but it burned with a familiar weight. Far away, on a hill shrouded in the mists of the Valewood, Saraphina observed the kingdom she had once protected. She had not come yet. She was not yet ready to step fully into the lands that had turned their backs on her. But she was watching, waiting, feeling the pulse of the bond that still connected her to Kale, a faint echo of what had once been. For years in the Valewood, she had trained, endured, and transformed. Every trial, every shadowed vision, every spectral wolf she commanded had strengthened her, forged her into something beyond Luna. She was queen now, not merely of wolves or magic or shadow, but of purpose itself. And her purpose was clear. Velmora would be saved, even if it meant confronting the man who had caused its greatest harm. The first encounter came quietly, like the falling of autumn leaves. Kale rode to the eastern borders, drawn by reports of a shadowed figure commanding spectral wolves. As he approached, his heart twisted with recognition before his eyes could confirm the truth. There, on the misted hillside, stood Saraphina. Not the Luna he had known, gentle and silver-eyed, but a queen forged in grief and shadow. Her hair flowed like molten moonlight, eyes glowing with an inner fire, and the spectral wolves circled her with absolute obedience. The moonlight caught her figure, casting her in a silver and violet aura that made her appear otherworldly, untouchable. Kale dismounted slowly, every instinct of an alpha ward against the emotions swelling in his chest. "Saraphina," he said, his voice trembling. You've returned." She turned her gaze on him, eyes cold as starlight yet layered with the weight of centuries of pain. "Returned?" she echoed. "No, Kale, I have come back. I am no longer the Luna you cast aside. I am the Queen of the Vale, forged in shadow, and the storm you ignored for years has arrived." He flinched as if struck. Kale's pride, his strength, even his ego, all faltered under the gravity of her presence. And yet beneath it he could feel something dangerous stirring, recognition, longing, guilt. The bond they had shared pulsed faintly, a reminder of what he had destroyed. "Liriana," he began, realizing that the woman who had once replaced Saraphina could no longer protect him. She. Seraphina's laughter was soft, almost musical, yet it carried steel. "Do not speak her name to me, Kale. She is nothing. She was never the threat. You were. You betrayed me, your bond, and the kingdom itself. That is the poison that allowed chaos to grow." Kale's hands clenched at his sides. Every word she spoke was truth, and yet it burned more than any enemy's sword could. I thought I was protecting the kingdom," he said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "I did not understand." Seraphina's gaze softened only slightly, like the edge of dawn brushing against night. "Understanding comes too late, Kale," she said. "You chose your pride over your bond. You chose Liriana over me. And now Everything you have built is at risk because of your choices." The spectral wolves around her stirred, growling softly, shadows curling along their limbs like living smoke. Kale noticed that they moved as one with her will, as if she were the center of an orbit he could no longer touch. He realized with a jolt, this was not merely Saraphina. This was something greater, something beyond human understanding, something that even he, the Alpha King, could not simply command or bend. And yet, beneath his fear, a spark of hope glimmered. Perhaps this return was not only about vengeance. Perhaps there was a way to restore what he had broken. "Kale," Seraphina said, her voice low, almost a whisper carried by the wind, "there is a greater threat. Liriana has awakened something she cannot control. The abyss beneath Velmora is stirring. You have underestimated her for years, and now the kingdom suffers for it. I did not return merely for revenge. I returned to save what we once cared for, even if it means standing beside the one who betrayed me." Kale swallowed hard. His pride battled with fear, guilt, and an unfamiliar understanding that his survival and the survival of Velmora depended on her. And yet he had to face her, not as an alpha commanding his Luna, but as a man who had destroyed trust and now needed redemption. I will do what I must," he said, voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside him. "I will follow you. I will earn your trust again if it is possible." Seraphina's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing him. She could sense his sincerity, and yet centuries of betrayal could not be undone with mere words. She raised her hand, and the spectral wolves quieted, forming a barrier between them and the approaching darkness of the forest. "We fight together," she said, voice commanding. "Not as mates, not as king and Luna, but as leaders of what remains. Your redemption will not come easily, Kale. You will face the consequences of your choices. Every misstep, every doubt, every betrayal, it will weigh on you as you fight beside me." Kale nodded, understanding fully that the bond he thought destroyed was alive in a different way now, not tender, not trusting, but potent and unavoidable. The Luna he had betrayed was gone. The queen she had become demanded respect, obedience, and caution. And yet he could not deny the pull, the ancient connection that still linked their hearts, even through centuries of pain and exile. The first test came almost immediately. From the shadowed edges of the forest, a pack of Liriana's creations emerged. Creatures neither fully wolf nor fully spirit, twisted by magic and malice, their eyes burning red with unnatural hunger. They charged in a wave of chaos, and Seraphina raised her hand. The spectral wolves leapt into action, surrounding her, moving with uncanny precision. Moonlight twisted into blades of silver, striking the corrupted pack with unerring aim. Kale drew his sword, feeling the familiar weight of steel in his hand, yet realizing it was Seraphina's command, her aura, that truly controlled the battlefield. He fought not for glory but to survive, to protect, and to prove himself worthy of the trust she might one day grant him. Every strike, every movement reminded him of the years he had lost, the love he had shattered, and the chaos he had allowed to fester in Velmora. When the battle ended, the ground littered with shadows dissipating into mist, Seraphina approached Kale. Her robes were untouched, her presence calm, as though the fight had been a simple rehearsal. Kale, on the other hand, was bruised, exhausted, and painfully aware of his limitations without her guidance. "Do you see now?" she asked, voice soft yet unwavering. "I am no longer a Luna at your side. I am the force that protects this kingdom when you cannot. And yet, even with my power, we cannot fight her alone. Liriana is rising, and her ambition feeds the abyss beneath Velmora. This is the only way forward together." Kale bowed his head, shame and determination warring in his eyes. "I understand. I will do everything I can to follow your lead. I will not fail again." For a long moment they stood across from each other, two figures linked by the past, burdened by betrayal, and yet facing the same future. The bond between them pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of what had been, and a warning of what was still possible. Above them, the moon broke through the clouds, casting a silver light that reflected in Saraphina's molten eyes. Cale realized then, with sudden clarity, that he did not fear her power. He feared losing her again, losing the chance to make right what he had broken, not as a king, but as the man who had once loved her with all his heart. And the forest around them seemed to whisper in agreement. The storm had arrived, and Velmora's fate depended on the queen and the king walking a path of redemption together, even if that path was forged in shadow, grief, and consequence. Velmora's sky burned with unnatural colors. A crimson mist rose from the ground, swirling around the castle towers and creeping across the forests like liquid fire. The wind carried whispers of despair, and the wolves of the kingdom moved in restless chaos, their howls echoing the unease that gripped every heart. The abyss Liriana had begun to awaken was no longer distant. It was here. It was real. Saraphina stood at the edge of the battlefield, her molten eyes reflecting the swirling mists. Spectral wolves, silent and obedient, fanned out before her, forming walls of shadow and silver. Behind her, Cale Draven, the Alpha King she had once loved and who had betrayed her, drew his sword. He did not speak, but his eyes held the same mixture of fear, guilt, and determination she had seen when they first met on that misted hill. The Queen of Vale and the Alpha King, once lovers torn apart by betrayal, now stood side by side, not as partners, not as Master and Luna, but as leaders of a kingdom facing annihilation. From the shadows of the castle rose Liriana, transformed by dark magic. Her robes seemed woven from the abyss itself, flowing like living darkness. Her eyes burned red with ambition, her smile cruel and unreadable. She raised her hands, and the ground trembled as creatures of night and shadow poured forth, twisted and hungry. The ritual she had begun beneath Velmora's towers pulsed with power, threatening to tear the kingdom apart. Saraphina stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. "This ends tonight, Liriana. You will not destroy Velmora, and you will not command its destiny." Liriana laughed, the sound echoing like shattering glass. "And who will stop me, little Luna? You, the king who abandoned you. You are both weak. You cannot touch the power I have awakened." Cale's grip tightened on his sword. "We are not weak," he said, though the words rang hollow in the shadowed air. "We have learned. You, Liriana, do not understand what true power is, not magic, not blood, but unity and purpose." Seraphina's eyes glowed brighter, the moonlight twisting around her form. She stepped closer to Cale, not touching, but her presence filled the space between them. The bond, once severed, pulsed faintly, not with the softness of love, but with the shared understanding of a destiny forged in betrayal and now strengthened by redemption. The battle began. Liriana's shadow creatures charged first, crashing against the spectral wolves with a force that could tear mountains apart. Seraphina raised her hands, and silver blades of moonlight erupted, slicing through the darkness. Every movement was precise, each command carried with quiet authority, and the creatures fell, dissolving into mist. Cale fought alongside her, his steel clashing with the corrupted beasts. He moved with skill and speed, but he knew it was Seraphina's power that gave him strength. He protected what she could not see, struck what she commanded, and together they formed a rhythm, one of shadow and steel, moonlight and bloodless fire. But Liriana was not so easily defeated. She unleashed waves of darkness, bending the very air, warping the battlefield with her magic. The castle walls trembled, stones crumbled, and the ground split beneath them. Cale and Seraphina found themselves forced back, fighting not just for survival, but for the fate of the kingdom. Cale glanced at Seraphina, and for the first time in years he spoke her name as he had in the past, not as king, but as a man who had failed and now sought redemption. Seraphina, together now. Her gaze met his, and though the faintest shadow of their old bond flickered between them, her voice remained steady. "We fight as equals, Cale, not as lovers, not as Alpha and Luna, as those who protect what remains. Together, they moved with an unspoken synchronicity. Kale's strikes drove back the corrupted creatures, while Seraphina's moonlight magic shaped the battlefield, creating barriers and striking down Liriana's forces with precision. The night itself seemed to bend to Seraphina's will, the mists curling around her like living shields, the shadows forming weapons at her command. Liriana's laughter rang through the air, sharp and defiant. "Do you think you can stop me? The abyss is rising. Velmora will fall and all your power will crumble." Seraphina stepped forward, her eyes glowing like molten silver. "You are wrong, Liriana. Power is not given by fear, nor claimed by deception. True power is earned through endurance, through facing the darkness within and without. You never understood that." A final clash began near the heart of the castle. Liriana unleashed her greatest spell. A torrent of darkness and fire aimed to consume the tower where Kale and Seraphina stood. Kale blocked the initial strike with his sword, but the force threw him back. Seraphina raised her arms, and moonlight shot forth like rivers of silver, countering Liriana's magic and striking the abyss itself. The two forces collided, the ground shaking, the sky ablaze with unnatural light. Kale staggered to his feet, his breath heavy, but he saw Seraphina's unwavering stance. She was not afraid. She was not hesitant. She was a storm made flesh, and the weight of her power and resolve surged through him. Then came the moment of truth. Seraphina realized that the only way to seal the abyss Liriana had opened was to merge her soul with the veil sovereign permanently. This meant she would no longer be the mortal woman she had once been. Kale saw her hesitate, the light around her faltering for the briefest instant. "Seraphina," he shouted, "no, there must be another way." Her gaze softened, molten eyes reflecting both sorrow and determination. "Kale, this is the only way to save Velmora. If I do not act, the kingdom will fall, and you will lose everything, even the bond that remains." Kale's heart ached. He could not bear to lose her again, not now, after all they had endured. He stepped forward, placing a hand over hers, feeling the pulse of the veil sovereign's magic intertwining with her own. "Then we do this together," he said. Seraphina's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and relief. The bond between them, once severed, pulsed strongly now, merging their fates. Kale extended his other hand, touching her shoulder. Together they focused, their combined will guiding the moonlight, their hearts beating in synchrony, even through pain, grief, and exhaustion. A blinding light erupted from them, pure and unyielding, striking the abyss at the heart of Velmora. Liriana screamed, her power unraveling, her form dissolving into mist and shadow. The corrupted creatures vanished, the castle walls steadied, and the crimson mist lifted as if it had never been. When the light faded, Seraphina and Kale stood in the quiet aftermath. The battlefield was calm, the spectral wolves circling, and the moon shone brightly once more. Liriana was gone, the abyss was sealed, Velmora was saved, but the cost was clear. Seraphina's mortal life had changed forever. She was no longer the Luna, no longer simply human. Kale realized that the bond they had shared would never return as it once had, not as lovers, not as Alpha and Luna. She was something more, a queen forged by shadows, grief, and power. He bowed his head, swallowing the grief. "I have failed you in so many ways," he said, voice low, "but I will not fail again. I will honor what you have become and what you have saved." Seraphina placed a hand on his shoulder, the faintest warmth of her old self still pulsing beneath the power. "You have learned, Kale, that is what matters. The past is gone, the kingdom survives. And we survive as guardians now, not as lovers, not as king and Luna, but as equals bound by choice, not fate." Kale nodded. The weight of his past mistakes lifted slightly. He understood that redemption was not easy, nor was it complete, but it was possible. Together, they had faced the abyss, faced the consequences of betrayal, and emerged not only alive but stronger. In the nights that followed, Seraphina and Kale stood atop the castle walls looking over Velmora. The kingdom was healing slowly. Wolves returned to the forests, rivers flowed with renewed vigor, and the people, though wary, whispered of hope. Seraphina's spectral wolves roamed at the edges of the kingdom, guardians of both light and shadow. Kale trained the living packs, strengthening Velmora's defenses, aware that threats could arise again, but confident that together they could face whatever came. And yet every moonlit night the bond between them pulsed faintly, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been gained. Not possession, not love as it once was, but connection, respect, shared destiny. For the first time in years, Kale allowed himself to feel peace. He had faced his ghost, his betrayal, and his mistakes. Seraphina had faced hers. Together, they had forged a future not from fate, but from choice, courage, and the understanding that power, when tempered by compassion and wisdom, could redeem even the darkest mistakes. The Queen of Shadow and Moonfire and the Alpha King, once broken by pride, now stood together as guardians, not as lovers bound by destiny, but as equals bound by redemption. The moon shone high, silver light washing over Velmora. And as the wind whispered through the towers and forests, it carried one truth. The kingdom survived, stronger for the trials it had faced, and the storm had passed for now.